Hey everybody, welcome back inside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. It is a Wednesday night. It is the practice report. It is brought to you by Byers Auto. Ohio State 1 day closer to hosting Purdue. 3:30 in the afternoon in the Horseshoe. A huge Big Ten game. That's Spencer Holbrook, Tim May, and Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. Got a nice collection. Almost every unit covered for the Buckeyes talking in here after practice on Wednesday. A physical, up-tempo, dark one as the time has changed and shifted. So, Birm, as you listen to this team on both sides of the football prepare for Purdue, what stood out to you as the most important development for these Buckeyes?
Self-acknowledgement, right? And DeJuan Jones said he knows the offensive line is struggling. That was his word. I've been reluctant to say.
He was very honest about a lot of things.
We don't want to use the word struggling for fear of seeming like we're overreacting, but the last 2 weeks have been subpar. And by par, I mean what we've come to expect out of this group, not compared to the national landscape.
Sure.
And then he
primarily running the ball,
right? And that's because that's about attitude. That's about running. Running the ball is about wanting to be better than the guy across from you. And sometimes I think the Buckeyes know how much more talented they are, and everyone and think they can just take a breath, and you really can't in the Big Ten. And DeJuan said, "Hey, they're not giving up. They're not surrendering to the idea that they can't fix this problem." And so, to me, that's the big thing. They know it's an issue, and they're working on it.
Absolutely, I think you hit the nail on the head there. And I asked DeJuan straight up. I said, everybody is saying that you guys are struggling. Do you see that too? And he's like, yeah, we do. We think we're struggling. But the thing that I'm taking away from this is I think Julian Fleming it's going to be really difficult because of the logjam that is there. But he's ready. Like, he is ready to make an impact. He's finally physically there. He's mentally there. I think he's as confident as he's ever been, which is weird considering how great he was in high school and how praised he was coming in here. I think this is a guy who you could see with fresh legs now. Hasn't had a lot of playing time. He could be one of those guys that comes in November and makes an impact. You see him all the time. You saw it in Chris Olave a couple years ago, or in 2018 during his freshman season. Like, there are guys who just turn it on when they need to, and I think Julian Fleming's due. I think he's going to have a pretty good next few weeks. I can feel it coming.
He made one last week, and he got robbed. I mean, that was I don't know how much you could slow down a replay and not see that he has control of the ball in his left hand. But I digress. Pardon the expression, Berm.
I like the expression.
What stood out to me today, but too in the last couple of days, is these players have little reference and really it doesn't seem to bother them. They don't think it has much of a play on this game. It was a 2018 upset by Purdue over Ohio State after that big storm blew through just before the game, and then Rondale Moore, Ohio State couldn't tackle Rondale Moore, and Purdue went off on the Buckeyes. That doesn't seem like it's been brought up a lot this week based on just conversations with these guys, because that was a long time ago, as you well know. What matters to them more is the fact that this team upset Michigan State last week. In fact, I'm trying to remember, was that an upset or was Purdue favored? But anyway, they upset Michigan State last week and beat them pretty soundly when you look back on it. And so that's the team they're preparing for.
I think Michigan State was a 3-point favorite in that game.
Yeah, it was close. I just remember it being close.
Correctly. But, I mean, it's kind of been amusing to hear all the questions about 2018. That is such a long time ago. Yeah. And the window for playing, like, there are guys who were around.
There are a few guys were on that team, but no one played.
Very few. Like, Marcus Williamson was asked about, and he's like, well, I was hurt. I didn't participate. Yeah. It doesn't mean anything to me. That's a guy who was on the team. Like, the people who were key cogs in that game are not here. Yeah. The guy who was the head coach is not here. It's so far removed from that. And I think, I would understand why the fan base may want to take it out on Purdue and get revenge and retribution because of what was taken from Ohio State on that night, pretty resoundingly and shockingly for those of us who were there. Yeah. But, it doesn't have anything to do with this one. And I think you can put that storyline to bed.
The only thing that's got some symmetry there is that the fact that Purdue had two big upsets so far this year, beating teams that run beaten, knocked them out of them beating ranks. Well, Ohio State doesn't have to worry about that.
There is more symmetry, and it's the fact that Ryan Day was calling plays for Ohio State that night, and the Buckeyes couldn't score in the red zone.
Yes.
And that has been a problem in the last couple of weeks. And so now, there is some relation to that. Purdue's defense probably has changed quite a bit in the last 4 years, but it hasn't changed all that much of what they do schematically. And so you think that Ryan Day, being the offensive mind he is, should have an idea of how to approach that this year. The quarterback situation is very similar between now and 2018.
Yes.
This receiving core is significantly higher end, higher ceiling, I guess, in that group in 2018, even though that was a really obviously great group with Terry McLaurin and KJ Hill and all those guys. But there is some symmetry, and Ryan Day is the one that has to have the long memory, and he does.
Yeah. Now, it's like I had a little thing right here screening, and you were reading the side of my head there because that's exactly what I was just fixing to bring up. And and the thing is, we're asking the offensive linemen, DeJuan Jones and Nicholas Petit-Frere tonight. I mean, like you talked about, they have had problems running the ball recently, of late, and it's really affecting them in the red zone more than anywhere else, in my opinion, of just not having that bite to this offense. And whether they've gotten that fixed, we're not going to know until Saturday night. But these guys, they're playing our number 16 in the nation in the red zone, stopping teams in the red zone. So that's a good matchup to watch.
And I think one of the bigger storylines that I asked DeJuan Jones about, and I asked Nicholas Petit-Frere, is like, how do you block George Karlaftis, one of the best defensive ends in the country? Like, it's a guy who just gets work done, and they said that Jack Sawyer's been perfect for them. Jack Sawyer's a 5-star guy who can move people, has a power rush move, but can also use the speed. I think that comparison is really interesting because I think now that they say that, I could see Jack Sawyer in a couple years being just what George Karlaftis is. And so they've had a good look at what he's going to present to them on this offense. And so when you combine the red zone issues, trying to remedy those, and trying to block an All-American style player at defensive end, we've got a lot of concerns for this offensive line, but I think they're starting to take this a little more personal than they were a week or two ago when they started to see the struggles happen. I think they're really starting to lock in. And
I think that there's a lot that you can take from that. The callbacks, not to 2018, but to week 2 for the Ohio State defense, is that, these lessons for Ohio State did come in wins, but they were not enjoyable for them. They've gone through 2 weeks where they had to kick 8 field goals.
Yeah.
That is not the standard for this program. It's not the standard for a team that was the number 1 scoring offense in the country. So they did enough to win the game, and they were playing good defenses. Not here to disparage Penn State and Nebraska. They played very well. But Ohio State has better personnel than both of those teams. I think if they can get through a little bit of the health issues that have plagued the Ohio State offensive line, they haven't been major things, but Thayer Munford has missed time. You've seen Nicholas Petit-Frere come out of games at times. Paris Johnson, we're not really sure exactly what it is that has slowed him down, but that's been going on for about a month now. And then DeJuan Jones, who had a bad, sausage McMuffin on Saturday. Yep. We got to hear all about his pregame festivities, but that caused some shuffling. And I think that the issues are schematic for one, and I think that Ryan Day will address that. They've had to shuffle personnel, and they didn't have them all together a top 5 during the practice week leading up, and they didn't have DeJuan Jones at the start of the game on Saturday. That's for 2. The chemistry has been disrupted. They haven't had a first-choice unit. And it's no excuse. Trevion Henderson has also been dealing with a little bit of that bruise in his knee. Again, it's November. That's going to happen. Ohio State has to get through all that, and that's what to piggyback on Spencer there. They've now been challenged the same way the defense was in week 2 after 2 weeks of struggling. Now, what are you going to do about it?
Well, a remedy, by the way, he used the word remedy. I found out a remedy for nausea is ginger ale tonight. So instead of Pepto-Bismol.
You just found that out?
No,
what?
Come on.
DeJuan said that was his remedy on Saturday.
Oh, boy.
I use ginger ale every time I feel bad.
You go through red zone issues for 1 week, you can chalk it up as an anomaly. You go through them for 2 weeks, it starts to become a trend. And so I think that's where the challenge goes. I don't want to, keep harping on this because Burb's got a great point.
They got to fire out and just knock people. They got to fire out and just knock people off the ball. Is what they're going to do.
It comes down to attitude, and that's really, that is the issue. It is about understanding that you are physically better than your opponent and playing like it. And in the last couple of weeks, for whatever Ohio State is doing schematically in the red zone, they are not blocking people, and that is a problem that Ryan Day has to fix, and that's what he gets paid a lot of money to do. And I think you have to just assume heading into this weekend that that's what they're spending every free minute on.
Too many hints out there that they're going to line up and try to just fire off the ball. Basically get a little bit back to more guttural offense, especially when it comes to running the ball. We'll see if in fact that happens. But clearly teams are muddying the waters in front of them. I know that's a common term now when you talk about things not being clear about what you're seeing out there. But I don't. With this offensive line as huge as it is and as athletic as it is, there's no reason for them to be struggling in the red zone.
And I think that that's where they will run it. But in terms of trying to be physical between the 20s and for the rest of the game, I don't really see that happening for this game because Purdue is suspect in the secondary and Ohio State still has C.J. Stroud at quarterback and 3 of the best wide receivers in the country to throw to now that Garrett Wilson will be back.
You're saying they're not going to be in the red zone very much? They're going to just be
maybe not, but
throwing over it?
But once you get there, if you get tackled inside the 20 and if you get into third in short situations, obviously Ohio State will have to run the ball better there. But there's like, I don't ever think that this team is going to be 50-50 in terms of yardage, in terms of play calling.
Oh, I agree with that.
They're far too talented through the air to do that. And certainly against this opponent, you know, I don't see that as a path forward, even if they're challenging them. And I don't think that means that you go out there and have Travion Henderson play 71 snaps and get, 30 carries. That's not good for Ohio State. That's not, that's not the path forward for a team with that much talent that can exploit every secondary in the country.
Somewhat comical. I mean, in the first 6 weeks of the season, we're talking about Travion Henderson needs more snaps, he needs more carries, and now the last 2 weeks, you're like, okay, can you just give this kid a break? Can you give this kid a break? You do have Master Teague, you do have Mayan Williams that are healthy and ready to go,
Make
especially
CJ
in the red
run
zone.
it. Yeah.
Like Master Teague in the red zone, that is his bread and butter. So you wonder if maybe Ohio State needs to bring him in that situation, let him be the hammer that he is. You also wonder why they're just not throwing the ball to the end zone when they're in the red zone, because that seems to have been a problem last week. They've just stopped doing it. And I don't know what's caused that.
That actually was a problem against Purdue in 2018, was throwing some of those screens to the sideline. You have players and targets that, especially the tight end, you talked Jeremy Ruckert that Spencer wrote about on Wednesday. You've got Cade Stover playing better. Mitch Rossi we've seen get in the end zone. Like, throw it to the goal line. That would probably help.
This is an interesting part of the season, though, because now you're getting into the point of, do you want to make a point on Saturday, for example, that you can run the ball, that you can get that yard by running the ball? Because it's always important for a team to have that confidence. Flip side of that is you want to score touchdowns, whatever it takes. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what I think Ryan Day's going to be juggling, if in fact he has to juggle that on Saturday. I agree with everything you said about this Purdue secondary and about any secondary Ohio State faces. They've got the weapons to get open against every secondary they face, including if they get into the college football playoff. So why mess around? Go do what you do.
Yeah, I guess my final point would be, the more we talk about this, the more it kind of, one of the things that perked up my ears was Ryan Day said, I thought you guys were going to ask me if we were throwing the ball too far. I do think there's a little bit of validity to that if you want to read into something about, there are times where he likes to prove those points. And so you wonder, is it going to be one of those things where they know they can get that on Purdue, or is it going to be one of those things where they challenge themselves and really try to run the ball? It's going to be interesting because I have no clue what they're going to do.
Yeah, I don't either.
Nothing matters except for walking out of there with a win on Saturday and playing better. Like, it's not just win, because there is a dynamic at play here that there are people watching and evaluating these things totally subjectively. And you do need to put a performance together that impresses people. And Ohio State has had that 5-6 week stretch where they really did that, got themselves back into the national conversation. And now you have to ascend.
Last player off the field, a Wednesday tradition for the practice report, brought to you by Byers Auto. Did you catch it?
No.
Tommy Eichenberg. Another guy, we've talked to Spencer and I, watched him on Saturday up in the press box, thought this guy's coming along pretty nicely, certainly compared to where he was in September, and the hand wringing about Tulsa. The guy's showing up. He can hit hard. He's starting to understand the flow of the game and where he needs to be, and Ohio State needs a lot more of that. And a full game of Steel Chambers would help as well. They should get both of those things, or could get them on Saturday at 3:30 as Purdue comes into the Horseshoe. Just an absolutely huge November game to determine that Big Ten championship. We will have it covered for you as always at Lettermen Row. That's Spencer Holbrook, Tim May, Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. Enjoy the rest of your week. We will see you there on Saturday afternoon.